Good afternoon, all. Welcome back. So, the next speaker for the day is Professor Utpal Tatu. Dr. Tatu has obtained his PhD from Indian Institute of Science and did his postdoctoral research at Yale School of Medicine, New Haven, Connecticut. He is currently a professor in the Department of Biochemistry at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. His research focuses on global health with an emphasis on making affordable diagnostics and medicines available in underdeveloped and developing countries. His research extensively utilizes tools of genomics and mass spectrometry based proteomics and metabolomics. He has served as a member of the United States Pharmacopoeia Expert Panel for Biologics and also headed several multi institutional projects with bilateral collaborations with international research laboratories and industries in the UK, Brazil, France, and USA. So, with this short introduction, I now request Professor Tatu to please begin with the lecture.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Ratnesh, for making me part of this nice seminar series. Thank you, Ms. Dr. Ashwini. It's a pleasure to be back interacting with scientists at ICT and students at ICT. I was there last year, I think year before last, and it was indeed a pleasure for me to see the momentum that biopharma characterization is gathering under Ratnesh's leadership at ICT. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about the mass spectrometry and its use in biopharma industry for protein and peptide characterization, and share some of my experiences in this topic today. It's an interesting situation currently. I think I'm so happy that March 1st marks my 20 years of association with biopharma industry. So really, it's very fascinating journey that I've had. And it was really in 99, 2000, when I started interacting with biopharma industry through mass spectrometry and other biophysical technique analysis. So it is really a good 20 years. And this is really the first talk I'm giving to the students at ICT at the beginning of, at the end of the 20 years of my association with biopharma. And as you can see in this slide, I think this was the original facility that I started in a corner of our old biochemistry department building in Indian Institute of Science. This was approximately year 2000, could be a little bit more, maybe end of 1999, or I don't exactly recall. Now, exactly 20 years since I started this journey with work. I think it's about, it's been a long time since my association with biopharma industry and use of mass spectrometry. And as I was beginning to describe this early mass spectrometer facility that I developed at Department of Biochemistry at Indian Institute of Science in early 2000. That's how I started interacting with some other industries who were early players, early entries into the biopharma game at that time. And then more recently, I've had a joint facility together with Agilent, wherein we are working on many areas of common interest and providing service to industry and academia on various aspects of mass spectrometry, with a joint vision to develop proteomic metabolomic applications, and particularly on applications of mass spectrometry in biopharma characterization. So really what I'm going to do is, since it's for students, the seminar, I want to convey to the students, and also maybe there are some industry participants, that mass spectrometry is started out as being a tool for peptide chemists like me. And it was used predominantly for sequencing peptides and proteins. And of course, as you know, mass spectrometry has a long history, more than a century of history. But it's only in the last maybe 15 years that it's used in biopharma industry. Biosimilar industry has become a common, and I would say it's only in the last 10 years that its use has become more common. But clearly, mass spectrometry has tremendous potential in variety of different aspects of research and development and applications. And we have done this, our journey in the last 20 years has included various different highs and lows in various different areas, wherein being at academic institutions, we started with providing workshops, organizing conferences. I do a whole full course for our students on mass spectrometry. We also participate in training for industry, as I mentioned. This was in 2000. It was uncommon for academia like University of Science in biology to interact closely. It was not very common. There were examples, of course, but it's so much more robust today. But we were one of the first to actually have started this interaction. And then also we extended to give consultancy to prospective customers. And over the years, then we have done lots of different things in different areas, which included not only biopharma applications, which is actually more recent, but also clinical proteomics, clinical metabolomics, therapeutic drug monitoring, mass spectrometry based newborn screening. And then more recently, we've been helping Venomics labs with snake venom characterization by mass spectrometry. So it's indeed been an exciting journey. And every few years, we hold hands with industry and sometimes also with mass spectrometry industry. Currently, we have enjoyed for the last few years a very close and unique association with Agilent, and we have created an innovation hub at Indian Institute of Science, wherein we provide actually customized solution to industry and then to society with large number of different molecules that we have characterized. Some of them are mentioned here below, but also with growing number of industries that we have catered to together. So what I'm trying to show in this is that what we could not have done alone as an academia, we were able to do together with industry. And in this case, I think we were very happy and very fortunate to be associated with a mass spectrometry company whose scientists and whose engineers worked very closely with academic PhD students as well as postdocs and faculty at Indian Institute of Science, and it has become a good example, I think, in terms of how mass spectrometry industry has worked closely together with academia. In the process, as I already mentioned, we have made use of a QTOF equipment for multi-purpose analysis, which includes basics of DMPK, but in addition, also it includes wonderful applications in monoclonal antibody characterization, metabolomics. In fact, we've also done some wonderful work with dopes analysis and various other industry in sports and in society in general. So I just want to say that the focus over the last several been that we would, so the principle that I'm going to talk about today is focused on critical quality attributes, which is the main topic, and with the principle that the better the drug is defined analytically, greater the chance of its clinical safety. Under this broad topic, how can we use mass spectrometry is what I'm going to talk to you and show you that close association with industry has helped us develop solutions for biopharma industry. Again, I think it's giving problems in moving slides forward. Yeah. Now, because this talk is targeted a lot to youngsters in the field, and I was young at one point, and as a student, I remember that my journey in peptides, proteins, and glycan really started at a very basic level. I'm showing you one of the slides that I had in my thesis, actually, which talked about, at that time, mass spectrometry was only an emerging. We had only heard about it, and there was some presence of mass spectrometry in India. And this is now I'm going back to 1990. That's when I submitted my PhD thesis, which predominantly had very basic chemical tools such as paper chromatography, wherein we separated and resolved various glycan molecules and monosaccharides, disaccharides, trisaccharides by paper chromatography, and then peptides by paper electrophoresis. So really, that's really how my interest in macromolecules, proteins, peptides, and glycans started. And predominant part of my thesis actually worked on old-fashioned technologies like high voltage electrophoresis for peptide separation and paper chromatography for glycan separation. And from there, now today, we are, as I'm showing you on the right panel, very, very robust methods. Whereas we required several micrograms, hundreds of microgram amount of quantity of starting material for paper chromatography. Now we are able to do in in less than a microgram, in very, very minute concentration, we are able to get glycan profiles using mass spectrometry. But the emphasis now that I would like to say is that if your basic chemistry is strong, only then can you make efficient use of the mass spectrometers, because mass spectrometers on the one hand offer you very convenient tools, but to get the maximum juice out of it, to get the maximum benefit and information out of it, your fundamental understanding about the chemistry underlying many of these methodologies is very, very important. And that's really how I think we have made some small difference in this field. Again, I want to emphasize that oftentimes what you study as a student and when you are a postdoc stays with you, and you never know when it's going to come handy as the situation changes. Another example I want to show you, and again, this is more to motivate students and postdoc who probably are listening to the talk. Also, it could be from industry, that the work that I did as a postdoctoral student, as a postdoctoral research fellow at Yale, was predominantly focusing on how glycoproteins are made in the cell, which comprised of co- and post-translational modifications, including disulfide oxidations, as well as glycosylations, which are shown here. And that knowledge of what is going on inside the cell, inside the various intracellular compartments, including endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi, how glycan modifications happen before the protein appears on the surface or is released or secreted out, also became very, very useful for us to understand what we are doing today, which is basically biopharmaceutical protein product characterization. Now, since we are currently still in the ongoing pandemic, we are talking a lot about COVID-19. I will say that COVID-19 we have to consider every scientific talk in terms of the threat to the mankind that we are witnessing today. And mass spectrometry based characterization of peptides and proteins is also relevant for COVID-19, for the reason that large number of different products are now coming out which are targeting COVID-19. And that's something for students that, for me, it's probably, it's not too late, but we are already doing some work on COVID-19 targeting peptides and proteins as therapeutics. But just to show that the journey will be very fascinating for young people who will get into it now. For example, I want to show you this paper which came out only 19th February of last month, that is last month, that people have now reported monoclonal antibodies which target SARS-like viruses, and they've shown efficacy in animal models. And it's very likely that next generation therapeutics will be monoclonal antibodies and may also be peptides. FDA has already given approval to monoclonal antibody for treatment of COVID-19, which target the S-glycoprotein of spike glycoprotein of COVID-19, but also a large number of peptide drugs are in clinical trials at various stages, and some of them have been approved by FDA from a variety of these companies that I'm showing you here, which are basically peptides of about 15 to 20 amino acid length, which show amelioration in COVID-19 condition in critical patients, and also in some cases bring relief in terms of treatment. So everything that we are talking about today is also relevant to what the current pandemic needs. And I think young people should pay attention to understanding how mass spectrometry is going to help us fight the current pandemic. I may just want to add before I talk about the current slide that in a couple of weeks back, a paper came out from our laboratory which proposes mass spectrometry as a diagnostic tool for COVID-19 diagnosis. This came out in the Journal of Proteome Research. I'm not highlighting it here, but to tell you that the uses of mass spectrometry in the ongoing pandemic are going to be relevant, although currently everybody is focusing on rapid antigen tests and LF and RT-PCR. But I think it's very, very likely that a lot of work that's going on currently in my lab and in many other labs all over the world will bring into perspective potential of mass spectrometry for large-scale screening, not only for diagnosis, but also, as I showed you, indirectly by characterization of monoclonal antibodies, for treatment, and then peptides for as therapeutics. Now let's come to the main topic that I think we are here to discuss, which is couple of sort of examples of how mass spectrometry can help you. And I have you may have heard these talks early on in various other platforms, but I will just sort of recapitulate some of the essential points. That today monoclonal antibody is in focus by industry because large number of monoclonals which are coming out as for cancer therapy, as well as therapeutics for various other ailments, including COVID-19, as I mentioned. And what's important then is to define critical quality attributes that need to be focused on for monoclonal antibody characterization to ensure that they will be effective in clinical scenario when you inject them into patients. Now, many of you are aware that monoclonal antibodies are made of two heavy chains, two light chains joined together by disulfide bonds, and it has glycosylation sites on each heavy chain. And this glycan together with disulfide complement, and then many other modifications that take place on the side chain of amino acids make monoclonal antibody a very challenging molecule for to be used for clinical purpose. There is tremendous heterogeneity, and large number of people have focused on a variety of modifications which include N-terminal heterogeneity because of cyclization of N-terminal amino acids, other modifications such as amidation, isomerization, deamidation, glycation, which are chemical modifications that take place during processing, during fermentation processes, and so on. And then, of course, the clipping, C-terminal clipping of asparose bond, as well as other modifications such as complementation by disulfide bonds, and I already mentioned in glycosylation. All of this result in monoclonal antibody, a particular monoclonal antibody appearing in large number of shapes and sizes with unknown biological effects. And that's where monoclonal antibody comes handy, because now you are able to specifically address many of these modifications. And what I want to tell you is the half-life of this monoclonal antibody, which is represented on x-axis, will vary significantly with what modifications have taken place on the particular monoclonal antibody. As I've shown you, the variants, variant 1 versus variant 2 have vastly different half-lives in the plasma, because while they are both monoclonal antibodies, a particular kind of monoclonal antibodies, they do differ in some of the modifications which have been listed here, highlighting to us that understanding these modifications and to be able to reproducibly determine what modifications have taken place is of great importance. And that's really where mass spectrometry has played a very important role in the last several years. It has really, as I said, in the last 15 years, I have proposed that mass spectrometry will play the role of a Swiss knife. Multiple potential sort of attributes can be monitored in a quick manner, in a rather efficient manner, which is in a way that no other biological analytical method will allow us to do. At a time when I started talking about mass spectrometry, as I said, in almost 2 decades back, people used to laugh at me, because at that time, industry used to wonder that, hey, how can we afford this expensive tool? How can we have this tool? And we are doing well with simple analytical methods in our laboratory, and mass spectrometry is very theoretical because we cannot afford to have this tool, and developing expertise is also very hard in this very unique and niche analytical methods. What you are witnessing today is actually, to me, it's highly dramatic, because when I used to give talks like this and present slides like this, it took me a lot of convincing to people that although initial investment in mass spectrometry facility establishment are high, the dividends are going to be tremendous, because you are able to combine their high resolution and speed, which are very important because of the problem associated with low sample, the limitation of samples that are available for characterization, and then the multiple criteria which eventually result in defining critical quality attributes of the biopharma product are all made possible very effectively. And so in the end, then what you will get is reduced costs associated, because you see that at an early stage, when you did the first pilot study, when you created the product at 100 microgram, 500 microgram. You characterize this extensively because you had access to this Swiss knife of biopharma industry. And many of you know that many of the biopharma companies abroad, which are actually which have developed so many large products, analyze as many as 50 critical quality attributes using mass spectrometry, and emphasizing then that yes, indeed, this tool is here to stay. And for me, as I said, it's very, very gratifying because I was one of the first person in India to actually pitch forward the potential for focus at that time, and faced a lot of resistance because people used to really consider this unlikely, and they used to think that because I have a mass spectrometer in my lab, I'm proposing this, but it's never going to become a commonplace tool. And here we are today. Every company which is in the biopharma industry boasts of having wonderful mass spectrometer in their own company, and they find it extremely useful. So my sentiments, I think, I'm sorry, I'm just talking more sentimentally, but if you understand where I'm coming from, you'll realize that this has been an exciting journey. And also for students, it's very important because you really have to catch on with new technology. I started thinking about mass spectrometry already in 1990. 1989 and 1990. My first seminar on mass spectrometry was in 1987. At that time, I had not seen this instrument, but I was very fascinated with this instrument. It was only now that we are close to, it's going to be close to 3 decades when I'm actually at a stage where I think I understand a little bit about use of mass spectrometry. And again, I apologize for this personal journey, but I think many of you are at a stage where I was 30 years ago. And so this could be of importance. There'll be new emerging technologies in addition to mass spec, which you must pay attention to. And mass spec is now coming in shapes and sizes and different versions of it. We have to keep up with this technology to be able to help and the biopharma industry and to be able to participate in the exciting developments that are happening in the industry currently. What I want to again emphasize is the multiple critical quality attributes that can be addressed, be it amino acid sequence modifications, modifications such as glycosylations. The three-dimensional folding of proteins, including monoclonal antibody, can be analyzed by mass spectrometry. And then other, the modifications that are imparted to increase stability of monoclonal antibodies, such as pegylation, and then other undesirable modifications that happen can all be analyzed by mass spectrometry. As a result, it's really indeed is a Swiss knife for pharma industry. What I'm going to show you is some of the work done together with some really smart scientists and engineers with Agilent Technologies who worked together with us in our laboratory and also in their center of excellence to develop data which has become extremely helpful for beginners, for people who are not well versed with mass spectrometry. But today's the new next generation mass spectrometers have become very user friendly. You really don't need to have done a PhD with use of mass spectrometry or with deep knowledge of chemistry, but you can press a few buttons and quickly get answers related to the glycan isoforms, to post-translational modifications, and so on for important molecules such as monoclonal antibodies. I've shown you here. I'm going to give you some flavor of how deglycosylated, fully intact molecule analysis will actually give you insights into various forms of mass spectrometers. Of biopharma products. First, I'm going to start by telling you that even with intact map, if you have a sample of an intact monoclonal antibody, there's a lot that you can do with the deep knowledge that's available today, which was not there. As I said, 20 years ago when I started, we had to really sequence every amino acid. We really had to break down the protein into peptides and then sequence every peptide. But today, even with intact map, you are able to get some wonderful data. As I showed you here, the resolution has become so high that, in this raw spectrum, you have so much information that's actually, and that needs to be decoded, because you see this, I think, the multiply charged spectrum of an intact map, as to remind you, 140,000 Daltons. What a feat it is to be looking at such a large molecule at a level of sensitivity that's possible with the mass spectrometers. Looking into each of these peaks, if you see, actually there is a splitting, like various sub peaks are actually hiding behind this individual peaks in a multiply charged envelope, and those have really the information about the isoform variants in monoclonal antibodies that we are looking at. Each of these are multiply charged, and each of these varies from peak to peak in a small manner. What I want to show you here is that data acquisition, integrating peaks, as I already showed you, and then deconvoluting to give you the glycan isoforms in this case, or let me not say glycan isoforms, but isoforms in general, which will vary in molecular weight by small numbers. In this case, of course, it turns out that part of it is contributed by glycan heterogeneity, but it also could be, say, some other variations in modifications. But here I'm going to exemplify this case by glycan heterogeneity. So in a matter of minutes, you are able to record an intact map spectrum, raw spectrum, deconvoluted to give you the to give you the glycan isoforms, which are beautifully analyzed by some of the programs that are available that match your peaks with sequence and mass to give you identity of isoforms. And the report comes out in a matter of, as I said, in less than 10 minutes. Starting with a monoclonal antibody with a tuned mass spectrometer, you have the kind of glycan isoform. So imagine you are in an industry, the pilot scale production has started, you are characterizing the first batch, and in a manner of few hours, you are able to go back to the production team and say that, hey, this glycan isoform is acceptable because this is what we were looking for. Or no, you may find that the glycan isoform does not show you, it shows you the wrong number of galactoses, wrong number of glucoses, and that then again is a very important caution. So that's really where the value of mass spectrometry is. I'm showing you only very limited data here, emphasizing that molecule like Herceptin, you can record intact mass spectrum in a non-reduced form, or in a reduced form where you can separate the heavy chain and light chain. And again, I acknowledge engineers from Agilent industry, particularly Dr. Ashish, Dr. Saurabh, who actually are going to talk to you about this in the afternoon later today or tomorrow, actually going deeper into the technologies that they have empowered our labs with. To show you then, of course, the raw spectrum showing the multiply charged isoforms, and then the deconvoluted spectrum. The numbers that I showed you here now are interpreted in terms of the glycan heterogeneity, the number of fructoses, number of glucoses, and that then whether it's a G0, G1, a combination of with or without fructoses, and so on, are at a glance available to you at a fairly good sensitivity and specificity. The numbers that are shown here at 4.3 ppm are already actually exaggerated. You actually can do much better than that. So I'm not showing you the best spectra, the best data that's available, but one of the early data that we could develop. But today, I think the resolution has gone even better in terms of the parts per million sort of value that you can resolve the peaks at. What I'm also highlighting in red here is that you are already able to get insight into the complement of disulfide bonds that are present in your intact monoclonal antibody. So now, for me, this is actually highly, it's like a miracle, that you get like less than a microgram of a protein, such as monoclonal antibody, you put it in your mass spectrometer, and mass spectrometry is telling you whether or not there are disulfide bonds and how many disulfide bonds are there in a matter of minutes. I think for an old-fashioned chemist like me, this is a remarkable feat. And this is where I think the excitements are, that today mass spectrometry technologies have moved really fast in giving us solutions which will help us to make quick decisions and go back to our production team to make changes if necessary or if not. Showing you here the light chain and heavy chain individually, giving you the molecular weight at a third or fourth decimal accuracy, but also the presence or absence of disulfide bonds and the glycan isoforms, very beautifully exemplified here. And this is again another one, a NIST reference monoclonal antibody, showing you the total ion chromatogram, and then again heavy chain and light chain separately, giving you the disulfide complement and glycan isoforms. I can keep showing you the spectra, but I don't want to belabor this point, because I think the technical people who are doing this day in and day out will be able to do better job than me. And I think there are some nice talks lined up by Dr. Saurabh and Dr. Ashish Pargaonkar, who will be actually doing better justice than me. Just last one slide in this topic to show you that when you cleave cleave the glycan moieties using glycanase enzyme, in this case PNGSF, chop off the glycan, and then begin to look at it, and you see the light and heavy chain in a totally different manner, because especially the heavy chain, you are now seeing the deglycosylated form. The masses have come down exactly by the mass of the glycan moiety, and so you are able to confirm whether the glycan heterogeneity that you found and the heterogeneity in molecular weight that you had seen was indeed because of the glycan changes. With this few slides, I'll move on because the points are made very clear. But I just wanted to exemplify here another minute, small thing, that while in industry, people work at one monoclonal at a time, in academia, we have the time and the interest in comparing and sort of doing a little bit of academic R&D, which oftentimes industry pressures don't allow you to do. And that's where academia industry collaborations become fascinating, that we have access to wonderful material from the industry, and they can leverage on time flexibilities that are associated with academia. Herein, as an experiment, together with the United States Pharmacopoeia team led by Dr. Krishna Menon, at that time, several years ago, we were actually intrigued to see that we were able to identify peptide differences between 3 different monoclonals that were available to us at that time as reference material, as innovator products, and we were able to pinpoint peaks that were unique to each in the complementarity determining region, which then becomes a diagnostic for a specific monoclonal antibody. It's as I'm presenting this, I think it's wonderful because I'm going through this in my mind, that how at different stages we have used wonderful different technologies. And I think, I'm sure that the youngsters here will do so much better because they are probably in touch with much more modern technologies which are actually coming out now. And it's very possible that I have not kept up with it. But Fabricator, another sort of development in monoclonal antibody characterization by a company which that developed this product, a protease that chops off monoclonal antibody right at the hinge region, and thereby the FC region, which are of less interest, because that's not the business end of the molecule. The business end of MAB is really the FAB domain that you are able to separate in a very, very swift manner using this very unique enzyme, and thereby then able to look at the FAB domain of the MAB and characterize different sort of the different appendages of your monoclonal antibody, the FC part, the FAB part, and then whether or not it's with glycan, because you can actually remove the glycan, and then different parts can be really teased apart to be able to give you the data that I talked to you at the total ion chromatogram level, or in the deconvoluted spectrum to give you a very, very unique specific numbers that tell you the details of the structural changes that have taken place in this molecule. So with that, I want to highlight that, yes, monoclonal antibodies will allow you, mass spectrometry will allow you to do a lot already with intact monoclonal antibodies. Some of the examples I showed you, quantitating in plasma with intact MAB is possible, and that's going to actually result in a whole new set of data. That's only time will tell how useful it's going to be, but I foresee that this is going to be an important aspect of next set of developments that will happen in MAB therapy for cancer patients and many other ailments. And then host cell protein analysis, that's possible to do with mass spec, and then hydrogen deuterium exchange, which allows you to do detailed structural characterization at the 3-dimensional structure level. You are able to get a view of the intactness of the protein at the 3D level for mass spectrometry. And I may or may not have time to exemplify each one of them, because I'm going to focus predominantly on 2 exciting products. One, as I told you, intact MAB analysis, and maybe I'll show you some examples of quantitation, but then quickly move on to a product which is it's been an intellectual challenge to scientists, and that's something that I will talk to you in if I have a few minutes in my talk, but I think we are doing okay with time. So I will move on and show you that, yes, indeed, again, I acknowledge the able support from the engineers and scientists with Agilent who helped us with this analysis, that Herceptin molecule, how you get linear data up to a 0.03 nanograms of material. Imagine 0.03 nanograms of Herceptin on column gives you data which is quantifiable at accuracy of that are numbers that are mentioned here. And to show you here, actually the raw data, this is what we are talking about, a range, a diluted range of Herceptin from 0.03 nanograms all the way up to 50 nanograms. And as you can imagine, you are actually able to see a beautiful peak corresponding to Herceptin, which is different colors show you highly reproducible biological replicates, and then highly quantifiable, and then just showing you the various concentration range, 0.03 nanograms to 0.1 nanograms to 0.3 nanograms to 1, 3, 10, 31, and 50 nanograms. Of course, by then everything is appearing like so robustly huge that you are really getting a peek into the minute details of it. But already at a 0.03 nanogram, you got so much details in the deconvoluted spectrum that I'm showing you here, which is not that different, except that the intensities are much higher with higher concentration. But to be able to glean the glycan isoforms at 0.03 nanogram is really remarkable if you understand what I'm saying. Similarly here, I think this is, of course, not just one spectrum, but highly reproducible in terms of, the G0 to G0 F, different glycan isoforms that you show at different concentrations of the monoclonal antibody that I showed you some of the raw data with. Finally, I'm going to come to, the quantitation part, which I showed you very quickly, but I want to end this discussion by showing that host cell protein analysis is where a lot of attention is now being paid on the use of mass spec, because traditionally people did this using immunological methods, and now it obviously had a lot of disadvantages, but mass spectrometry offers you unbiased analysis of HCP, where you don't need to know what you're looking for. You don't need to have antibodies for the host proteins that you're characterizing. You open-mindedly go and ask, are there host proteins, and to what level are they? As I showed you, with the ability to quantitate at a 0.03 nanogram level of your protein, you are able to see very minute host cell protein contaminants in your mass spec using what is called as the iterative MSMS, where you do repeated rounds of MSMS, each time eliminating the peaks which have already been fragmented, but going to the peaks of lower intensity that would have otherwise been neglected. And thereby, you are going in the deep end of your proteome and being able to actually identify proteins which are at very minute concentrations, highlighted by this calibration, wherein 15 different molecules are combined at different concentrations. I want to focus on this fascinating molecule, which is really a peptide drug. We talked about the large monoclonal antibody, but now I just moved down to a smaller peptide biopharma, which is also equally important and again very relevant for the industry, because just like monoclonal antibodies, which large number of biopharma companies in India are currently making, but also this drug called Glatiramer, few of the companies have manufactured in India, and we've helped them characterize this. It's been a very interesting intellectual challenge, because it's a drug for multiple sclerosis, which is an inflammatory disease affecting the nervous system. Many of you are aware of it. It affects central nervous system, causing neurological impairment. And there is really no remedy. There is no drugs except that this Glatiramer, which is a peptide, which is a peptide molecule that seems to have some benefit on this multiple sclerosis patients, and it's FDA approved on a fast track because it showed promise. I'm going to move swiftly just to share with you this exciting molecule that we've worked with in collaboration with some industries that came forward to to seek our help in characterization. A molecule which is actually a mixture of different peptides with a random assembly of 4 different amino acids, as I mentioned. How do you actually characterize it? It's really it takes an amazing effort, because it needs to be the random but reproducibly random. And there are wonderful papers that I encourage students to look at. It's just Glatiramer, a product called Glatopa, which actually has shown how this molecule was characterized, and we only repeated. In fact, we were not the first to characterize it. We only repeated what others have done abroad. How do you characterize alanine, glutamic acid, lysine, and tyrosine in random different distributions, random sequence, and random length? And this is a wonderful molecule which you do by chemical synthesis, wherein you put 4 amino acids with a sort of what you might call, it has a cap at one end, and also what is called as activator. And then you carry out polymerization, and then you carry out partial depolymerization to make smaller combinations of this. And as you can see now, you have this 4 amino acids, alanine, tyrosine, and glutamic acid and leucine in random order and random numbers, each one ending with an activator and initiator, and then of course what you have is a molecule. Now, how do you characterize it? Because it has to be reproducible, because they are neither completely conserved nor they are completely random. And as you can imagine, for a product to be approved by FDA, there has to be a norm. How do you now say what is the molecular weight of this? How do you now say what is the sequence of this molecule? And so, interestingly enough, FDA allowed this molecule. It has endorsed this molecule, which is an average molecular weight from 5 to 9 kilodalton. So really a range of molecular weight which differs by size, and but basically comprised of 4 amino acids as building blocks. How can you characterize it? This, I'm just showing you some of the raw data of this molecule, reproducibility of how the TIC looks. But then when you look deeper in the deconvoluted spectrum, we had wide variety of isoforms, which will actually, the challenge was to do statistical analysis, because you need to say from run to run, the combinations that you see actually are uniformly distributed. It can't be identical, but it's uniform with the kind of mass range that the molecule is exhibiting. And that is what is represented in simple way over here. The different colors representing the different batches of this molecule, each one having its unique combination, and which is not fully random, but at the same time not identical. And that then you characterize with the replicate 1, replicate 2, replicate 3, replicate 4, each one actually exhibiting slightly different combinations, but with a percent C variance of which is mentioned here. And then, of course, the sum total of it is that you do principal component analysis and what is called as SIMCA, which is another statistical tool to be able to differentiate that, yes, indeed, you are able to find 2 different populations of molecules which are uniquely different, the copolymer versus, of course, the bigger polymer, which is done before, which comes before depolymerization. And that then is possible to differentiate using the characterization that we did on the mass spectrometer. And that is really a remarkable feat, because it gives you an ability to find, I would say, method in madness, because heterogeneous molecules, and yet you are able to find a common theme, which you are able to convince the FDA that this molecule is a particular drug. It's a drug with well-defined randomness. That's what I would call it, well-defined randomness. And that is then you're trying in your clinical trials. Because of the small sort of a time that I lost because of the internet fluctuations, I'm not going to carry this forward too long, but will end and want to leave you some time with this thought. I'm not showing you data in this case, but just want to end by saying that today you have a humongous molecule of 150,000 or 145,000, whatever you may call, monoclonal antibody, which you are able to actually measure conformation of using hydrogen deuterium experiments, wherein relative levels of deuterium in it are giving you understanding about its conformation, and in a peptide segment specific manner. So you are able to compare, for example, an innovator molecule with your own molecule that you may have generated in your industry, as to how similar is it in its conformation in specific peptide fragments, specific peptide regions in the monoclonal antibody. For example, here, just as an example, we have shown you peptide sequence from 292 to 308 sequence in the primary structure, how that peptide conformation looks in terms of its deuterium levels, and thereby in terms of its conformation between the native versus the deglycosylated molecule, how the conformation is quite different. Just to highlight that when you deglycosylate the molecule, the conformation changes significantly resulting in its ability to actually take up deuterium during the deuterium exchange experiments. Another segment in the same molecule, but a different primary structure sequence from 242 to 253 then shows relatively less difference in its conformation, unlike the segment from 290 to 2308. So this is possible to achieve and thereby project the three-dimensional similarity in the innovator versus your own molecule that you may have produced in your laboratory. With that, I want to thank the audience, and I really do apologize for the internet problems that we have had in the last few minutes. But I think I've been able to get the excitement across in terms of what mass spectrometry can do for a biopharma scientist, be it in industry or in academia, and the tremendous potential that this tool has. And oftentimes, I say this in my closing remarks, that it's up to your imagination where to use mass spectrometry. There are given number of standard applications that people have highlighted, but it's really up to your imagination how you're going to use it for your application in your particular molecule that you are looking at. So really don't necessarily only follow what has been done by others, but use your articulation of where I can apply this sophisticated tool for biopharma characterization. With this words, then I thank again the team at ICT, Professor Ratnesh, and the wonderful young team at this small the institute that I admire so much. Thank you so very much, all of you. I'm happy to take questions if there are any.
Yes, we do have some questions. I'll just read it out to you.
Okay.
Yeah. The first one is, which is the best technique for aggregate evaluation?
Well, I would think, we all use basic gel filtration chromatography, I would say. And we grew up doing column chromatography when in the early days. But yes, I think, but again, mass spectrometry, you can actually use a gel filtration chromatography. It's a simple method and still a robust one. So HPLC, I would say that the HPLC in combination with MS would give you so much more information. But the simple answer would be for that HPLC suffices to actually to give you fairly acceptable data on aggregation in biopharma products.
So the next question is, can you tell us about the sample preparation method to detect COVID-19 through mass spec?
Okay, yeah. Well, that's something, as I said, we have recently published a small paper which sort of projects this, wherein we used clinical swabs. And what we did was we tried various different, it has been an interesting 2020 last year for us. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we actually were very much in the middle of the diagnosis and surveillance of COVID-19 in Karnataka. We've been supporting GOK in various different ways. And as a result, we also had access to clinical samples really from the very beginning. And what we did was to spend a lot of time developing methods that from the clinical samples that are available. As you may recall, in March and April of 2020, lots of real-time PCR testing labs started, and predominantly using clinical swabs. And there wasn't much about blood samples done at that, even now. So we struggled and developed a method which comprises of actually a combination of different denaturants and buffers together with minor amount of detergent. If you refer to our paper in Journal of Proteome Research, which got published last month, you will get some insight into it. But feel free to write to me for any further clarifications, where we were able to use mass spectrometry quite effectively to be able to detect peptides already in the clinical swabs. There were only 5 other groups. Actually, we submitted this paper already in May or June of 2020, but the reviewers were so critical. It took us almost 6 months to get the paper through, to revisions that we had to go through. They were rather slow in getting this paper accepted. But to tell you that I think what we have shown is only a proof of principle. There are 5 other reports from all over the world that have dabbled into this area. With say fair amount of detail, and the promise of the paper, the proof of principle that I have shown, really highlights that in future it can become a routine diagnostic method. This paper is only more of a scientific paper. It's projecting really the potential of mass spectrometry in diagnosis. But yeah, please do refer to the paper. You'll quickly find it on the PubMed or in Google if you look at Journal of Proteome Research.
The next question is, how do we select the peptides for MRM in COVID testing?
Right, that's been an area. I think there are again some papers which are coming out. A lot of them actually are using a triple quad. So I think typically what you do is look at one of the most intense peptides that you find in your peptide digest. The most intense or the most robustly reproducible peptide is what you're going to focus on, and then look at its product ions, assuming that it is fragmenting also very well. Because if you have a robust precursor, good intense peak, then hopefully the product ions will be very strong as well. So I would say the simple answer would be to go by the intensity in terms of selecting the peptide that you want to look at, and which gives you a good series of ions in your fragmentation pattern to be able to ascertain. And then, of course, then in your MRMs, you are ready to go with just looking for a particular couple of peptide masses and its product ions. So that's really where the technologies are now moving in terms of, as you very rightly said, MRM-based diagnostics for right now. Of course, these are methods which are in the pipeline. They are not yet accepted. They are not yet out there. But I'm sure this will become a potential useful tool in future.
Thank you, sir. I believe there are no more questions in the chat box.
Thank you very much again and patience, and thank you for bearing with me during the interruptions of internet that we faced. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such an informative talk. Please accept a sincere gratitude, and we truly appreciate your consideration and your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.